An exploration of Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale in relation to the significance of female oppression as a result of corrupted government. Transparency International defines corruption as the abuse of entrusted power for private gain, emphasizing its consequences in terms of eroding political trust and weakening democracy. The Juliet government implements a style of leadership which extends beyond the classical political methods of totalitarianism and oppression and into the realms of extreme fascism, where psychological as well as physical control measures are exerted over a mass population to ensure a full conversion to, as well as outward conformity, with the pervading ideology of female inferiority and oppression. Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale is set in a dystopian society where corruption is well established. Language as a method to manipulate. Atwood explores the government's influence of female oppression with the corruption of basic thought and language. This demonstrates a clear hijack of emotion and human instinct for violence and rebellion against patriarchal authority and attitudes. The condemnation of Janine after her admittance of enduring gang rape at 14 years of age illustrates the misogynistic harassment the government enforces to highlight her perceived responsibility in the rape. The handmaids chant in unison, "Her fault." The expectation for Janine to accept blame is further reinforced with a third repetition, "Teach her a lesson." The final repetition initially has no italics, "crybaby, crybaby, crybaby." Atwood does so to represent the progressive acceptance of this truth that Alfred's experience at this ideology was imposed on her, with any remaining trace of irony or obligation diminishing with each repetition. She states, "We meant it." This example perfectly illustrates the regime's strategy of turning women against women, victims against other victims, corrupting against any natural capacity for human solidarity, as well as the effectiveness of using language as a coercive means of enforcing social norms. Ultimately, Janine herself succumbed to the regime's dystopian principles within her terminal declaration, "I deserve the pain." Dystopian regimes depend on citizens' adoption of ideologies through the medium of spoken language, denouncing their own identities as effectively as any captor might denounce them, and the corruption of the human instinct for self-preservation is complete. Childbirth as a means of survival. Chapter 16 begins with a ceremony of intercourse between Offred and her commander with the hope of fertilization. Despite Offred stating, "This was my choice," she juxtaposes herself, "There wasn't a lot of choice," and "give me children or I die." This raises the question of whether consent has value in a society corrupted to the extent that fundamental rights no longer exist. Offred is warned by her doctor that she doesn't have a lot of time left. The imperative to produce children while she remains fruitful to ensure her survival reduces Offred to an object to be used by the state, depriving her of the agency required for consent to be a meaningful concept. This resonates with feminists today who are aware of the pressures women face as a result of biological constraints on their reproductive timeframe, combined with their desire for self-actualization through their careers or other facets of their identity. Atwood envisioned the gaze Atwood envisioned the text as a proto-feminist evaluation of the patriarchal gaze over a woman's role in society. From a feminist perspective, the book has only become more relevant since its publication in 1985, as more options have become available to women in terms of education and career, as well as contraception, and the pressure to make the right choices has increased. The distortion of maternal love. Atwood has acknowledged the inspiration she took from 1984 as an example of dystopian literature when writing The Handmaid's Tale. However, there are numerous real-life examples of the corruption of women's intrinsic reproductive rights. For example, just prior to The Handmaid's Tale's publication in 1985, a parallel situation could be seen during a period of state terrorism in Argentina, also known as the Dirty War, when an estimated 30,000 people were kidnapped or killed in pursuit of removing left-wing opponents from society. Crucially, in terms of Atwood's contemporary inspiration, this included many pregnant mothers. Over time, this created a population of children raised by cat mothers, echoing the circumstances in which children were brought up in The Handmaid's Tale. This corruption of maternal bond and the status of her mother in the eyes is depicted backward with the continual juxtaposition of the wives and handmaids, emphasizing the wife's relative vitality and control. Unlike Janine, who is crying helplessly, burnt out miserable tears, and the election of the wives carry plates, coffee cups, and wine glasses, and treat the labor as an activity of leisure and competition. Not only does this insult the handmaid's contribution to the exhausting work of labour, it further objectifies them as a body to be fertilised. A metaphor to describe Angela in the wife's eyes as a bouquet reinforces the idea that this baby is not birthed from love but as a tribute and possession that evidences the wife's success. Engulfment in the colour red symbolises the handmaid's sole purpose to fulfil childbirth, since the colour of blood reflects the colour of labour and the menstrual blood. The residency of the mothers once their children no longer require breast milk, she will be allowed to nurse the baby, further highlights the disposability of the handmaid's primal emotions relating to their own children. One could argue that this division distorting the relationship between mother and daughter is an intentional shift by Atwood, who wanted to represent the cultural shift from eulogizing obedient domesticated women towards honoring those who are more socially brave and rebellious, that she had observed in her own experience as feminism became more mainstream. To conclude, the Handmaid's Tale dystopian regimes offer a paradigm of extreme corruption which extends beyond the objective of classical definitions of corruption that merely seeks to secure male privilege or female submission through nefarious measures. The regimes endeavor to sustain ultimate power against weaker minded women coerced into embracing ignorance over natural thought and abandoning their own human drives and instincts. Although the manipulative elements of Gilead successfully oppress nearly all biological, physical, and spiritual liberties within their respective society, resistance against the regime remains a lurking presence in the form of deviancy of certain characters, leading to an out of control element that no regime can finally corrupt.